Hello.
Hello. Such a happy moments. Ah,
Bloop, 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 bloop.
boop, 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 boop. Oh, then the picture's coming up?
Everyone's just bubbling on. Yes.
Ah, good to see
And
you.
just good to be with you all today.
Hi. You might look at the other page just to see people you know or don't. Fellow yogis. Mm. So we're going to take the time to let your attention just settle around your body, the space around your body. And just, it's like taking your time, letting the sensations on the surface of your body emerge. Emerge wordlessly, gently. We can have a visual image of our bodies that will come and go, which is a thought from the past. And there's no need to struggle with that or try to get rid of it. The image, the memory will come and go. Just come back to the physical sensations. And letting the attention go wherever it's called. Sometimes it's helpful to notice where our sit bones connect with our cushion, bench, bed, or floor. And you take the time to feel into our alignment between the earth and the sky. And interesting to notice all the little movements in our body that allow us to come to stillness. Without forcing. Just getting that sense of knowing, hearing is happening. And just like clouds come and go in the vast sky, the sounds, physical sensations come and go. No inside, no outside. We can just make space for the receptive attention Jesse was instructing last Sunday. It's that light pause and receiving textures, vibration of silence, of any sounds inside the body or outside. And again, noticing any thoughts about sounds or images from the past, words. Coming back to the direct experience without going through the thought memory process. And of course, noticing if we can receive the textures and vibrations directly. Noticing what happens to them when we notice them. So we get that safety and protection of being connected with impermanent. For example. And of course, we can take much more time with coming to stillness through our awareness of hearing. We can also shift to our hands for now. Again, it's so interesting to see how quickly the visual image comes. No problem. And then exploring and discerning. Receiving the aliveness in the present moment. Without the memory, not going through the thought process. always changing, alive, not me, not I, not mine. And the movement of the breath at our abdomen. Again, we can come to a deeper stillness through our awareness of just receiving these wells, like in the ocean, receiving, disappearing, coming and going, without having to fix, manipulate, or do anything with them. The awareness and the movement coming and going. We can get that sense of, that felt sense of how quickly thoughts come and go and how powerful they can be if they think they are ours, that we can control them. Just hearing, just sensing physical sensation, as thoughts coming and going, just like clouds passing through. That light and the pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral stream of feeling tone, and particularly with emotion, kindness, caring about pain, appreciating joy and gratitude, peace, joy, happiness, enthusiasm, excitement, calm, sadness, grief, anger, fear, loneliness, disappointment. Just like clouds passing through the vast sky of mind, heart, body. With great kindness and care. Seeing if we can allow our experience to be just as it is, because it is, just as it is. Anchoring when we need to, exploring our sixth sense door, moment to moment awareness when we can, no problem.
Thank you, Michele. So we have some time again today to take any questions that you may have about your practice, the instructions, whether it's technical method about Vipassana, anything happening in your practice that you'd like to check in about, questions, and anything in terms of integrating your spiritual life into other aspects of your world. Can run the gamut. So if you have any questions, the bottom of your Zoom screen, there should be a little button that says raise hand. You can click on that to let us know you have a question, or you can type into the chat that you have a question to me, and I'll call on you to do that. Looks like Sun has raised your hands. There's an example. So we'll start with you. Hey, Sun. Oh, hold on. I have to let you unmute. Wait. Okay. Good. Try now.
Yeah, about sending metta, like I remember Steve makes it very simple. Just say metta, and it seems like it's much easier this way than trying to say the traditional phrases. But so I'm curious, is anyone use the traditional sentence phrases?
Does anyone? Anyone in any of the directions? Is that what you're mostly doing? Sun?
Yeah,
Are you mostly just sort of say metta and kind of feel into it?
I use both. I just start like the traditional phrases. May I be safe, may I be well happy, may I be healthy, and then after sometimes I just feel like just saying metta is enough.
Yeah, really beautiful. I'm sure we might both have a few things to say. Michele, did you want to jump in?
I can start. I mean, this is like a couple hour talk. So as most of you know, we tend to encourage different techniques because the Brahma Viharas works very differently for all of us. And what we mostly emphasize is that usually having several different ways that we practice loving kindness, metta, or the other Brahma Viharas is helpful because sometimes, for example, sometimes the traditional phrases work really well. And then you'll, like as you say, for yourself, that sometimes it's too many words, too much, and the feeling of the metta is there. And you would just say metta once in a while. That's one way that works for people. Now, some people do the phrases all the time, and some people don't use any phrases. So it's really important to respect what works for you versus what you think you should be doing. Like that, those are often miles apart. And I know Jesse will have a lot to say. I'll just add right now that if one is using any words at all, even if it's just the word kindness or something, like what you will usually notice over time is that it depends on how much concentration we have, how much the meaning will sink in. So that's what's very interesting, is that if we say the phrases and there's no concentration and there's no meaning, we might as well be saying, I wish I had a dog. You know, like it doesn't matter what we're saying because there's no meaning in it. So what if you do use phrases, it doesn't mean you don't say them because not having the meaning them is a way that we discover that we're kind of spaced out. But it doesn't mean that the phrase, repeating a phrase is ever bad or wrong because our thought stream tends to be so discursive that if we're saying, may I be happy, or, you know, may I be safe and protected, any of these things, it's so beautiful, a shift in the most of our thought streams. And if you have that understanding of it, and one does keep repeating, at some point, the concentration does come back and it's very powerful. So there, for some people, that works. And then you drop the phrases when you don't, when you feel like the feeling, the experience of the loving kindness is there. And then you might bring a phrase back once in a while just to kind of jumpstart it again. For other people, there's a very different orientation where you call up the loving kindness and you wait to see what happens. And you just call up the loving kindness, wait to see what happens. I mean, we do whole courses on this a month long. And so it can be that you see that will encourage, some people like that style and they do the loving kindness for their moment to moment experience in the Vipassana, for example. So that it might be that at some point the loving kindness gets very strong, and you just abide there and you're not with your moment to moment experience during those times. So that's just like a very short answer, and maybe Jesse, you could fill it in because I think it's such an interesting question, and it works differently for everybody. Oh, one more thing. There's no like baby steps here where if some people will think, oh, abiding in metta is better than phrases, right? Or this way is better than this. It's all skillful means. It's really just all skillful means, and it can change in 1 minute. You can be really feeling a lot of loving kindness, and then something happens, and you're angry as anything, and you need to do the Vipassana practice. So I just want to bring that up. That I would recommend valuing any way of doing this that helps you, and not saying that one is better than the other. It's my short answer, Jesse.
Yeah, I don't think I have to. I mean, you know, Sun and others. It's like, you know, we really encourage what feels like is working and to go with that, and always be sort of in relationship to the what might be offered in kind of the traditional context, you know, so that we're not just dismissing it, but we understand kind of what place that holds, why that's valuable, what it might be missing, and where we supplement, or, you know, where we make decisions in relationship to kind of some of those other methods that we've inherited and value a lot. I may just say something about, you know, those phrases, the quote unquote traditional phrases, really that aren't necessarily from the suttas or from what the Buddha said, but from the kind of commentarial work that was developed, you know, after after the time of the Buddha, you can see that a lot of thought, energy, and practice went in for centuries, of course, of trying to put a little more method onto what maybe the Buddha kind of proclaimed, and that's like invaluable. We're so indebted to the fact that people did that, and these incredible compendiums of knowledge and method and understanding. And of course, there's a way that sometimes any tradition can get kind of over. We value so much of the, like, and we still really identify as with the Theravada lineage, this the kind of way of the elders and the texts that are foundational from that. And at the same time, I think in any human endeavor that has ancient roots, you have to have some rigorous relationship with the orthodoxy that still allows for flexibility and what's appropriate to contemporary situation or the whatever's actually happening in your practice in any given moment, so that you're not just we don't just create a kind of fundamentalism. And I think that's always like a careful dance. And so that we mostly encourage the desire, the effort to be careful in that, but to also not feel imprisoned by some of the sort of orthodox method that has come through, because it's incredibly valuable and it's not the only thing. And the many lineages within Theravada Buddhism, within Burma, within a few miles of any part of Burma, you're going to find a lot of different approaches, like a huge amount of like kind of wild variety of what people encourage. So, just so that you trust yourself enough and your own entry point, that always feels like the most important thing. We don't lose track of some of the more kind of structured forms that we value also. Those are also things that are really designed. They're so much of their primary focus in terms of like the Visuddhimagga is around intensive periods of practice, really creating very absorptive states of concentration. And those methods are helpful for that. They're also not necessary for that. And what can be lost is that actual just connection with caring, right? That we can get overly fixated on how valuable the concentration is and can be, but at the cost of actually feeling that tenderness of heart. And so what you're describing of like, how do you actually find your way to that gentleness and that caring? That is I think what we don't want to ever lose sight of, and so that for us is still going to be the most fundamentally important thing, because you can even use that as the basis for concentration. You don't need to use actually the traditional phrases to get very concentrated as well and to the same levels of concentration. Though you can see how that kind of leads towards it. That sense of like, where do you feel like you actually can care is much more important in our daily lives and really even I'd say in our practice life than of course the skills around concentration and the stability of that are also important, but how thirsty we are for that tenderness, how much aversion or bitterness or resentment or anger or frustration can start to become the go-to defenses in the heart in regard to what's happening in our lives, in the world, and the day-to-day, that is a real spiritual danger. And so whatever it is that actually gets us into caring and feeling the security, the stability, the sweetness, the beauty of that as a refuge. That's something really important for the heart. That's the most important most of the time. Yeah.
But because like one time, I usually do metta at night when I lie down to sleep, and then one time I had the very sweet dreams, very friendly sweet dreams. But when I wake up, I'm not happy. I just want like the Vipassana, like to be clear. And this is just like the benefit of being friendliness and happy. And I don't know, I feel like if I have to pass, I want my mind to be clear before I pass this away. And I don't want like, metta is good, but I would like to be like free from the cycle of rebirth. So
Isn't that fun how like we can dismiss the value of like, oh, it's nice, but and you're right, of course, too, you know. I mean, I think that it doesn't have to be maybe such a one at the expense of the other, right? That the sweetness and the kindness opens the way for the mind to also be relaxed, and the mind that's relaxed can get concentrated and calm and equanimity. So I don't think, you know, you're not having to choose one over the other. You can see how they relate, but you know, as you of what you're saying too is like one can get attached to the sweetness, you know, or thinking that it's gonna create a better dream life, or you know, that whatever, you know, that of course that there's ways in which we don't want to be caught in that, but you also don't want to rationalize. You don't want to use the Dhamma to rationalize a devaluing of love. You know what I mean? Like, you don't want to. Just because you're right doesn't mean you shouldn't also keep practicing metta. But I think that sounds like a good mix, you know. Oh, Michelle, you're muted there.
I think that true metta is very difficult. So true metta is like infused with wisdom. So that's where, as Jesse's saying, you don't want to separate it too much, because it's like mindfulness is awareness infused with wisdom. And then loving kindness is love infused with wisdom. So we have to be careful of having an idea about one being better than the other. Again, I think that you can get attached to sweetness in the Vipassana practice as well as the metta practice. And so when metta is hard, it doesn't feel sweet at all. It feels like there's a barrier between us and others. And I think, again, if you just look at the world news and you look at how your heart is responding, you can probably get a sense of how much metta we all need. So I just think we have to be careful. Again, I think that when you understand what wisdom is, then it includes non-sweetness and sweetness, and it includes anger as well as love, right? Like, so that inclusivity of experience is what is so liberating. But how the wisdom affects the metta is that's how love becomes unconditional, without conditions. That's why you can wish well all beings everywhere, boundlessly, no matter what the behavior. Now that takes so much wisdom. You can't do that without wisdom, because then you would only pick the beings you approve of. And you don't want to send metta to the beings that we don't approve of their behavior. So it requires so much understanding. That's where we have to be careful of separating these practices. You can't separate wisdom out of any of the practices.
Yeah, so like when I see what routine is doing, I can feel a lot of aversion, but I can see like, but it's hard to feel compassion for him. Like when I know that in the end he would be getting what he would be solving. I can write about the death of Stalin. It was horrible. But I felt some satisfaction when I read about the Stalin death, because it's feel like he deserves it. I don't feel any compassion.
Yes, that's why it's considered difficult. Yeah, sometimes, U Pandita would teach that often with a being with very, very harmful behavior, that often we find a route into the compassion by thinking of their future life and feeling compassion for their future life, that it is mostly inevitably going to be very painful. So that can be a doorway into the compassion.
Thanks, son.
Yeah.
Tan, before I call on you, I think there was someone, Richard, was Richard up?
Yeah, Richard was there.
I don't know if he's still here, or did you have a?
Let me look. Yeah, he's there. Yeah, he's there.
Well, but I'm just saying, I don't know if he has a question or not. And if not, we will. No, you're good. Okay. He's shaking his head. Tan.
My question for Michele and Jesse is more a technical question. I remember the instruction is not to choose a deaf person for metta, but please correct me if I'm wrong. That is mainly if you aim to reach jhana. If you don't care about reaching jhana, and then it doesn't matter, right? Is that correct?
I think that is a very good question. You're told. I mean, my understanding is that you're correct, that the instructions are to not do it. There are, I've heard a number of, sort of like mystical interpretations, or I don't know how to say it, but that people were not able to, whether it's to get into jhana or that there were other inhibitions in terms of things inhibiting people's practice. And when they found out that the person actually had died, that was like, oh, that's why it wasn't working, or something like that. They maybe didn't know consciously that the person had passed away, but it didn't work. I do think that there's also, outside of maybe the cosmological questions around that, I think there is an understanding that it can be hard to, if it's a person you cared about, then any grief or sense of longing or loss or sadness that's associated with the loss of that person can be an unnecessary obstacle to trying to find a place of love and kindness and care, for a being. So, and there is a way, of course, that would be an obstacle to really absorptive experience of loving kindness. So Michelle may have a take on it. I mean, I think you're right that ultimately that is the rationale that I understand most clearly as to why not to use a person who has passed away as the object of your loving kindness. And therefore, if you're not concerned with absorptive concentration, that it can still be a meaningful person to practice with. And I would say it could be that there are still other challenges that arise with that. And that it could be a conceptual challenge, because the idea that a person is in some other realm or in a different mode of existence is hard. That method of imagining someone, bringing someone to mind, and creating some stability around this sort of caring, may you be safe, may you be happy, may you be healthy, that the uncertainty of their situation, that it is very hard to create a stable kind of notion. And I think that's partly why there's a lot of emphasis put instead on sharing the merit with people who have passed away. So this idea that you have, when you practice, you're building a sort of momentum of good karma, and that you can orient that towards someone else's well-being. I think that it's a very broadly practiced thing, and I think that is probably for me even I'm more skeptical of like how can you share the merit? I mean, if there's one thing that's understood, is that we are the owner of our actions, and that you actually can't do that. You cannot have your karma influence someone else's karma. It's like the one thing that seems to be very clear. And yet I think it develops as a practice, in part historically. I've read this is in part because there is a desire to do what you're describing. There's a desire to be able to like send good things towards those who have passed away. And if we're not allowed to practice metta, then we'll do this sharing of the merit thing. So I think to some degree, it just points to like people are going to find a way to do it one way or another. And you might as well just do it, and feel good about it. And know that if it's hard, we've been warned.
Okay, I'll add a little bit more. In regard to the instruction not to choose a dead person when you're doing that loving kindness practice, I'd like to offer a little bit about, again, the intention of that, as well as what Jesse has said, and the meaning of it, and that usually if you're taking yourself out of your household life and you're entering a retreat container, whether it's a retreat or at home, and you're doing the loving kindness practice, if you do it in that traditional way, as a concentration practice, if that's the intention of it being a concentration practice, then you could see why the instruction would be not to choose a dead person for all the reasons Jesse's saying, because the goal of the metta practice as a concentration practice is a very intense stability. And I like to think of the first month of doing a metta retreat like that. It's just like having finding an anchor in Vipassana. You're cultivating that anchor for a lifetime. And just as with the metta practice, when it's a concentration practice, the first being you're picking is a being that you're choosing for a lifetime. You're supposed to build up the loving kindness with that being, so that when you move to someone difficult, you have the metta developed. I hope that's clear. Like it's like a stable, like anchor. That's the intention of that kind of instruction, so that 10 years from that retreat, you call up that being, and it's very easy to call up. You've been practicing it. Yeah, so the idea is if somebody's dead, you can't get the same felt sense. You know, when we instruct it, when you tune into the being, you're trying to get the felt sense. But as Jesse says, it's not, you know, like it's imaginary, your felt sense, because they're dead. Like, I hope this is clear. It's mostly like they've already moved on. So, however, I just want to say that when I went to do my first long retreat of love and kindness with U Pandita, 2 months, I had already planned out that the first being I did for my anchor was going to be Deepama. And she passed away. She died like a few days before my metta retreat. And then U Pandita said, I'm going to pick somebody dead. And I was like, oh, you know, here comes disobedience coming around the corner. You know, it's just like, there's no way I was not going to do, you know, metta for Deepama for a while. She was like my root guru. Like it was just crazy. So I offer that just as a hilarious karma joke. Like it was so ironic that somebody who had
So
metta
How'd it go?
so
Did you stick with it?
I
so
did for a
did
while.
you use Ipama?
Yeah.
Well, I don't even want to say because I don't want to influence people. I'm just saying I did it.
I don't know if that's fair, Michelle. I think you need to.
I would say that maybe picking someone like Deepama, it was hard not to go into jhana. So like Deepama, I think I had the perfect metta being to
And I
practice
guess
with.
with you have a lot of confidence that wherever she was, it was.
I had a lot of confidence where she was. Yeah, I could feel it. So yeah. But I'm just saying that because I really feel like you have to kind of hear all this stuff. And I've had so many students who have had experience, and mostly I would say when you're jumping into a retreat and you're doing metta, a dead person doesn't work that well. It's true. But this is like, we're into this for a lifetime, folks. And it's like, of course, you would include that person in your day of practice. How could you not? Like even if you're not using that person to go into jhana with, you're going to be, if you're walking or eating, or you do metta all the time when you're on a retreat. And of course, I'll have people do somebody that's died. They might not be that first category where you're learning how to go into these concentration places with it, for sure, because mostly it doesn't work. It's true. Too hard. I hope that's clear. I try to be honest.
Well, to summarize, that would be okay if you include that in a group of people, but not as a single person to start having metaphor, right? Is that
Right,
correct?
right.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you. So
yeah,
Yeah.
that's clear. Yeah,
yeah.
And I mean, Tan, I would also say for myself, recently, of course, my mother passed away this spring. And amidst all of, I mean, of course, there's a huge range of emotions that have come up over these months. And when I was just back home visiting and kind of our last, our memorial service and stuff, I had a lot of beautiful feelings arise, right? Love for my mom, appreciation, compassion for things that were hard in her life. And they were usually in regard to past moments, those types of things, or driving around and having pleasant memories. So, well, I mean, just sticking with those three kind of Brahma Viharas, but of course the equanimity as well. it just felt like a really, when something would arise, it was really wonderful to be able to feel a sense of metta or feel a sense of mudita or karuna in regard to my mom. And I didn't necessarily, it wasn't like I was doing formal practice around it. It wasn't like I would sit down and go through these things, but it's like in my day-to-day life practice, it has felt like a very important part actually of the processing of her death and healing, and not, and I assume that's going to continue because it continues with other people who have passed away in my life, where it's not like there should be a prohibition around feeling these things from people, or when they arise that you don't like go with it and let it and relate to it as a practice, even if it's just fleeting, even if it's just for a few moments or a few minutes. I do feel like that would be a tragedy for all of us to lose that sense of, like, if something more naturally, spontaneously arises, that you don't take advantage of that, and use it and feel the goodness of it. And then, of course, there is this understanding that then if we're aware of the loss of those good things or the loss of someone we care about, then it can lead into sadness, and we need to be, of course, equanimity is the perfect balancing fourth Brahma Vihara in terms of being able to keep that going, on that level. So I think that it's been another great kind of example for me of just how beautiful the Brahma Viharas are as a complete package. Still distinct from just the Vipassana practice, but that we, can cultivate these through gain and loss, throughout our lives. Yeah. So thanks, Tom.
I
Yeah.
want to add a little bit more because of what you just said. It's like, just to let everybody know, it's like we're not talking about our household life practice, or like even on retreat. If we're not doing that concentration practice, we're not saying don't do metta for a dead person. Please know that. That's not what's being said at all. And yeah, I find that sometimes I feel the presence of someone who's died more after they've died than when they're alive. Like it's very powerful. Like I don't feel like I have this old friend from when I was a kid that said that to me once some years ago. She's like 89 now, or almost 90, but she said to me, she asked me about it, like why do I feel the presence of people who've died more after they've died? It's just that very important. And also, when I did do Deepama on my retreat, my first metta retreat, there was a point where I shifted off her to a relatively more normal human being and developed those people as anchors rather than just Deepama. I mean, I couldn't not try it, and I had to. It was just the way it was. I feel like it was choiceless, but yeah, it shifted eventually.
Right. Thanks, Tom. Oh, nice to have a metta theme. That's a good way to start the week ahead. We can.
And since there's no other question, I'd like to say one more thing, which is sometimes just one phrase is really helpful. Like through a day, just may I take care of myself happily once in a while. Like it can be a very creative, that daily life practice is like so much fun that way, like where it doesn't have to feel constrained at all. But if a phrase feels like it might be helpful that day, may I be strong and healthy of body, whatever, may I be kind, however it is, it's not like you're doing it all the time, but it can be a week of a phrase. I guess I just love that part of this practice, that it can be so creative. You could pick when you're brushing your teeth every night, one phrase. It can be very like automatic pilot, or you could be saying, may I be safe and protected. So much fun. That was my adding into what you just said, Jesse, about how wonderful to start the week with loving kindness.
Yeah, I also like to share that personally, I feel connected best with the Buddha's instruction in the Metta Sutta. There's one phrase that repeated like 3 times in the sutta. That's Sukhi no wa kemino hontu sabe sata bhavantu sukhi tata, which so I feel connected to that phrase best, knowing that that is the instruction that the Buddha gave. And other phrases taking out of Visuddhimagga. So I would prefer the Buddha's instruction than Buddhaghosa's instruction. So that's how I feel. So I feel more connected to that phrase. So that personally I use that nowadays. That's my phrase of metta.
That's really great.
Yeah.
And it's so important too, Tom, to say that, because it's like, we do the chanting on retreats at the end of the day, and there's a lot of value to it, but sometimes people don't do that. And I think that for us is like an important, really, it's like to any of those phrases. I mean, exactly. It's like you can go through that whole sutta and find a number of things and be like, oh, this just connects with us for whatever reason, in the English and the Pali and whatever other language. Actually, we were thinking of Molly kind of reminded me recently we could start trying to do the Hawaiian version of it as well, and find a way to sort of reintegrate that, because it is very powerful, and it is, you never know what it is that it's just gonna resonate with you, Tan, like you're saying, and that you go with that, and whatever that thing is, it's just if it clicks in for you, using it, writing it, yeah, it's a great reminder. Yeah, thank you. So yes, may we all be safe and protected, happy and healthy, ease of well-being, all of the good things. Yeah, take care of yourselves, each other, whoever you're accompanying in your day-to-day. And we'll see you next week. And folks who are carving, bowl carving, we'll see you tomorrow for our first class. Aloha.